Hello everybody. I'm back. I realized that there were some little gaps in the video that I'd done. Sorry about that. So I just wanted to get some clarification here for everybody. A, B, C, D, E. There's Dan Evans. This is nothing I ever would have known on my own. And only one other person on earth in all of my years even told me that this could even be found on such a document. The last video might have been a little bit too whimsical, so I really want us to focus on Dan Evans, Governor of Washington, member of the Trilateral Commission, Zbig Brzezinski, the director. I never would have just woken up and known that one. But that came because Stanley Aronowitz, he looks different now. He looks very different now, but that's definitely him. He had longer hair back then, and he sort of looked like Buddy Hackett. It's interesting. He's sort of tan and sort of more lean, and, he just had a baby. And I also said in the video, I don't know why I think I said he lived above me, but he actually lived below me on President Street in Brooklyn. And I had begun the conversation talking about him saying, "Where do you go to school?" And Jeff, that was my boyfriend, had said that he was in the political science at Columbia. And I was doing the Bazooka Joe mail order Evergreen. I never applied for any more schools in New York City. I'd gone to Friends World College out on Long Island, and so had Jeff, but we had moved to New York, and I was at Sullivan and Cromwell. That really blew Stanley's mind. He said, "What on earth are you doing at Sullivan and Cromwell?" In fact, I think that he knew that before I told him where I went to school. We went down to his apartment. We only did it once. It was like everyone was so busy, and he had just had a baby. He was a wonderful dad. We really could tell that. I always saw Stanley with like a big thing of diapers, coming up the street, or food for his wife. He was just a real teddy bear of a person, a really just wonderful father. But he was really upset with me for working at Sullivan and Cromwell. It had this reputation. I think he was sort of like left wing, and it's the place where the elevator doors open and you expect to see J. Edgar Hoover in the hall. There's this time machine quality. It's the Cold War law firm. And then he asked, I'm so sorry, let me try to hold this more steady. Then he said, "Where do you go to college?" And I said, I didn't even know if he would even know where it was. It was sort of half obscure and half well-known in New York. But I told him I would go to Evergreen in Washington. And he just, he stopped breathing. He just about died. And then he said, "Well, thank God you work at Sullivan and Cromwell. You're in the eye of the storm. You're at least safe there. As a proofreader there, you're not an experiment. They're not going to try to drive you insane, right? It's the MK Ultra school." And, I'm sure he's going to be, I don't know how he'll feel about me saying this, but he said it's the Trilateral school. And Lord knows what that means or what the implications are. And then, of course, Doc seeing, the SEER program, and I kind of have gone, I'm sorry, between the word psychiatrist and psychologist. And I do believe it was Department of Psychiatry. I'll just throw money on it. And I wish that I did have that that original book that I had. I'd gotten it from a pretty fabulous journalist. So here we have it. I never would have known. Everyone here just thinks Dan Evans, he's just a homeboy, you know. He's a moderate guy, a moderate Republican. He just wanted this wonderful alternative school. But one thing, you know, that I did learn in New York, I can't disclose things. I worked on classified documents. But in a nutshell, if I was to say you don't have to go to the sun to know it's hot, you cannot be too cynical. You know, and that is, you know, that's a line that I always did like of Edward Bernays. You know, it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. And I do get people telling me, "Oh my God, you're cynical," and I call them the civilians. And I was not in the military, although I did a lot of military documents. I did things called GOCOs and COGOs, and those are corporate operated government owned or government operated corporate owned entities, agencies, facilities mainly. And it's done that way so that there's less responsibility on someone, right? If you're the renter, you can blame it on the, you know, the landlord. If you're the landlord, you can blame it on the tenant. And this is the game that goes round and round because most of these places are toxic dumps and they, you know, anyway, we won't get into that now. What we're getting into now is the strange connection between Sullivan and Cromwell, Columbia University, the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission. What is the Trilateral Commission? I think it's worth really digging into this one. And it would also be nice, perhaps, to end it on a note. I've got to find it here. I just thought of it. Sorry, everybody. But if you can just bear with me. I remember it was mentioned sort of famously on Barney Miller.
Yeah, and this is William Klein. He was wrecking an office.
But I just wanted to meet them face to face. I wanted them to admit what they were doing.
Who is they? He was in the office of the Trilateral Commission.
Trilateral Commission?
Yeah, the Trilateral Commission.
All right, what is the Trilateral Commission?
It's an organization founded in 1973 by David Rockefeller to bring together business and political leaders from the United States, Europe, Japan, so they could work together for better economic and political cooperation between their nations.
Yeah, but that's what they'd like us to believe. But you see, what they're really up to is a scheme to plant their own loyal members in positions of power in this country, to work to erase national boundaries and create an international community, and in time bring about a one world government with David Rockefeller calling the shots.
I take it they're pressing charges?
Yeah, well, he broke a globe and some UNICEF artwork. Well, they're in on it too.
Okay, Mr. Klein, if you just...
I'm telling you, our whole way of life as we know it is in jeopardy.
I appreciate that information.
But I have the documented evidence. It's all in there. Show him.
Well, he's got these magazines here. Conspiracy Review, Suppressed Truth Roundup.
The whole master plan is exposed.
Yeah, well,
You're still not convinced, huh? Would you like to hear the names of just a few of the people who have been on the Trilateral Commission?
not particularly.
James Earl Carter. Heard of him?
Look, Mr. Klein.
Henry Kissinger. You heard of him? Walter Mondale.
Who?
Mr. Klein, this is
John Anderson, George Bush. Now, you remember at the convention, everybody thought it was going to be Ford for Veep. You know what happened? David Rockefeller just picked up the phone, put in a call. Hey, Ronnie, forget Jerry, it's George. Bye. So, no matter who won in November, they had their man in the White House.
Are you through?